It was a cold day after My Hero Academia's war arc when Izuku Midoriya laid in the hospital bed recovering from his injuries from the battle against Shigaraki. All Might sits by his side and no one else is allowed to enter as the other Class 1A students begin to wake up from their injuries, but there's still no word about Deku. Deku faced some of the most grievous injuries in the entire class during his battle, but this coma isn't just because of his injuries. Inside, Deku is having a meeting with the different users of One For All, where they discuss the history of One For All For One's past and his intentions of Shigaraki, and just what Deku plans to do when everything is said and done. We'll likely go over this in its own video, but eventually we see the situation in Japan start to deteriorate. 3 days after the battle, unease rapidly spreads through the streets as the heroes tried to handle the destruction caused by the villains, but many lives were still lost. The heroes who were at the pinnacle of society were held up there by the people, but the price of that was that the heroes had to save people without fail. That something like this couldn't be allowed to happen. But the way that it's framed to society is that this happened largely because of the actions of heroes like Endeavor, and the fact that this operation was carried out completely in secret with reports of students being involved that were swiftly denied really doesn't paint the heroes as very heroic here. Needing a response, people sat at their televisions while the streets filled with villains, just wanting things to go back to normal. But things continued to change. Endeavor confirmed everything that Dabi said and bows his head to the people of Japan, saying he can't apologize enough for his actions. Things don't get any better when Hawks also confirms and clears up what was said about him, sharing that his fake killing of Best Jeanist was just a ploy to infiltrate the League of Villains, but besides that, everything else that Dabi said about his father being a villain and Hawks killing twice was true. This meeting leads to an outburst from a reporter whose mother was injured during Makia's rampage, and ultimately it's decided that U.A High School and each of the other hero programs in Japan will be turned into evacuation shelters for the people of Japan, so they no longer have to live in fear of the villains, stating that the parents of various students have already begun to move in, but this is actually a problem for Deku. Once Deku woke up, he learned of the situation in Japan and how everyone, including his mother and all of his friends, were holed up at UA. Realizing that Shigaraki escaped and All For One is now free, Deku understands that Shigaraki is still in possession of the search quirk, which could ultimately be used at any time to track down his location with pinpoint accuracy, which could possibly lead Shigaraki to the shelter, putting his mom and everyone else in grave danger, since of course, Shigaraki can decay a whole town in moments with his quirk and just decide not to decay Deku specifically. And this is where Deku makes the decision that he can't return to UA anymore. He writes a series of letters for everyone in Class 1A, telling them that he feels it's time to reveal his secrets regarding One For All and how All Might passed it down to him, to explain why he now has to leave and go fight All For One and Shigaraki without them, because that's his responsibility as the next holder of One For All. He promises to protect their smiles, but says he'll no longer be a member of their class as he has to go. Deku sends All Might to UA to pull him out of the school, and also to leave the letters under every Class 1A member's door, and while All Might is gone, Deku heads over to Gran Torino, who is still in his bed recovering from his injuries. And given the fact that Shigaraki crushed one of his feet, completely disabling the use of Gran Torino's quirk in it, and he also gave the hero a matching stomach wound to All Might's, it's safe to say that this hero has flown for the last time. Deku, knowing exactly how much Nana Shimura means to Gran Torino, tells him all about his meeting with Nana and the other holders and the tears that she shed over Shigaraki and Deku's decision to save him. Gran Torino then chuckles, saying even in death she's still crying, as he sighs and apologizes to Deku for not being able to kill Shigaraki in the moment and hesitating. GT tells Deku to not be so rigid about saving Shigaraki, because killing can be another way to save someone who's suffering endlessly. As Gran Torino passes Deku his cape, passing the torch on to his student, Deku takes it and prepares himself by putting on his bloody and torn costume from the war arc, paired with new arm bracers created with tech and designs from Malicious Shield's glove in the first My Hero Academia movie that should brace Deku's arms, given the fact that Deku's gloves were completely destroyed in the battle. But not wanting to go without the gloves, Deku goes back to his old gloves from earlier seasons as he throws his cape over his shoulder and looks out into the Japanese streets filled with chaos, preparing himself for what it's about to be a long and exhausting mission. Now on this channel, we've already covered Deku's battle against Muscular immediately after he leaves UA, and we've also already covered the prison break itself, which led to those events. So if you want to know the details of how Vigilante Deku fought Muscular, you can watch the video in the card in the top right and skip to the timestamp in my pinned comment, but then make sure you come back here to hear the rest of this story. For those that have already watched that video though, we pick back up after the battle with Muscular, where Deku drops Muscular off at a temporary prison facility that has Iron Maidens, which are usually used to capture extremely powerful mutant quirk users, or Nomu. And as Deku flies away, he notes that the Fourth's danger sense has quieted down quite a bit, meaning that he has a second to rest. Deku makes a hard landing on the ground in front of All Might, but seems to be okay, and they quickly discuss the American arm braces that Deku is wearing to reinforce his body and improve his endurance. And at that moment, Hawks calls, showing that Endeavor and Jeanist and him are all fighting a villain together and pretty much have it captured, as he asks whether or not Midoriya is okay, and All Might says he is, but Deku leaves right away in a flash after sensing something with his danger sense, to which Hawks replies it's also probably because he wants to keep All Might out of danger since he's quirkless and is just sort of driving around supporting him like the man in the chair. That night, we see a group of civilian vigilantes armed with Detonarot support items attacking a tall fox-like girl who just seems to be walking by and minding her business. They scream, "You monster!" and continue attacking as she says she's just scared and isn't trying to cause any problems. As one of the bigoted villains shoots a powerful blast of water from his gauntlet at the girl that definitely would have hurt, Deku swoops in at a high speed, kicking the blast away, and tells everyone to calm down. It's a stormy night and everyone is anxious, but this is just a normal girl. Everyone needs to go their separate ways and just take it easy. But they say that she shouldn't wander around at night looking like that, showcasing some of the still lingering quirk-based racism still unaddressed in the world of My Hero Academia's anime, but that's what this arc is all about. Deku has never really gotten a chance to know the streets that he's protecting and the people that fill it. Now he's learning about all the kinds of issues that people face, and that while he's fighting to protect them, not everyone he's trying to protect is inherently good. Society itself is a world full of gray lines instead of being all black and white and clear cut. Deku gives the girl an umbrella to shelter her from the rain, and he promises to bring everything back to normal as he floats away from her, and All Might drives in with the Mightmobile, otherwise known as Hercules. And he does this to take her to the UA shelter, but before Deku runs off again, All Might gives him a specially packed meal that he prepared for Deku, since it's not like Deku can just go get food from home, UA, or the local McDonald's. At this point, Deku still has some spirit in him, and he cheerily accepts the food from All Might, but soon after, it's back to the job. But he doesn't actually stay there with All Might and eats the food, right? Because he knows that he can't actually stay around All Might too long, so Deku heads away on top of a large radio tower where he stands alone in the night as the rain falls, watching over the city waiting for danger as he eats, but it seems like for now he can eat and stand vigilant. The spirits within One For All start to discuss the state of Japan and how Deku needs to bring out the full power of One For All if he wants to make a difference. And this is where we learn that the different vestiges in One For All can now materialize outside of Deku, but only he can see them. They're sort of like misty stands that flow behind him and come out of his back and shoulders with a fiery One For All based smoke, and this is all because of the quirk tug of war between Shigaraki and Deku that took place in the war, sort of pulling One For All more freely. Once All Might brings the girl to the shelter, he heads back out onto the streets very late into the night, around 4 a.m., but he sees that Deku is still on the job and notes that he isn't really getting any sleep, which can't be good for him. So he starts making his way to Deku's GPS location that he has on his phone, and he realizes that right now he's in the same situation that Night Eye was in when All Might kept moving forward and didn't ever want to take a rest or a break, causing their fight that went on for years and years until Night Eye died. At that moment, All Might is about to apologize out loud for how he treated Night Eye, speaking to the spirit of his friend that he hopes is still listening from heaven. But suddenly, Deku's signal goes dark, and before he can grab his phone to respond, a grenade flies right past his face on the outside of the car and explodes, sending his vehicle spinning out of control as All Might comments that any car besides his Hercules vehicle would have been completely blown apart. All Might Tokyo drifts away, but then two villains appear jumping into the middle of the road, holding what seems like those thunder spears from Attack on Titan as they send them flying into the car, completely engulfing it in flames and sending it crashing into a nearby building as All Might leaps out of the moving car. Realizing who they're up against, one of the villains is shocked to see that it was All Might in his car, but the other says don't chicken out. The real All Might died a long time ago. This is just what's left of him, and we have a mission to separate him and the boy, so we need to get it done. run. Here though, when All Might should be absolutely powerless to do anything to stop them, his pure spirit and determination that still burns ever bright within his soul shakes the pair of villains in front of him. He takes a strong step forward towards them and says, "Step aside. That boy has dealt with so much more than I ever have at his age, because of a burden that I forced on him, but he still idolizes me and calls me master. The only time anything will ever happen to him is the day that I die, because as long as I'm here, I will protect him no matter what." This very much mirrors the scene of Stain walking towards Endeavor and Deku, completely sending a sense of fear into their minds from his conviction, which made them all freeze despite the fact that he should have been defeated already and completely helpless. And ultimately All Might gets the two to run off once they realize that he's still scary, despite his smaller frame. Elsewhere though, we see Deku traveling from building to building doing his usual patrol, and as he tries to place a call to All Might, his phone is rapidly shot out of his hand and onto a nearby building by a weird knife with a speaker on it wrapped in hair that pierces through his phone and holds it up against the building, playing a live audio message from someone nearby who says, "You, boy in green, you're coming with me." Now Deku realizes that this is the moment that he's been waiting for. Not just some random villain, but an assassin sent directly after him by All For One that he can question to get information on Shigaraki's whereabouts. And as we see who he's talking about, far away standing on top of a building with Kai Chisaki sitting at her side, we have a brand new character, Kaina Susumi, otherwise known as the lovely Lady Nagant, who we'll be discussing further, as well as her entire fight with Deku, her backstory, and her ties to Hawks in the next part of this series. Keep your eyes out for the full story of the battle, and thank you so much for watching. If this kept you entertained, I implore you hit the like button and subscribe to become part of my Pineapple Army. And yeah guys, this is Pineapple. See you soon, and make sure you check out my opening breakdown and my video about this week's episode, and peace.